All right. I am so excited about today's guests. We have Miss Jaiya, and Ian, her partner, talking about sex, marketing, business, and their movement and changes in the world. And I couldn't be any more excited. So, welcome to the show.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having us and talking about sex and business.
Yeah, you
Yes.
said the word sex, and I'm wondering. You said it really quick. I'm wondering if people actually heard it.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe I was trying to like quickly go over that. But let's just say if you have children nearby, it's possible that there'll be some X-rated material. So, just, be mindful of that. And so maybe to kick it off, let's talk about sex. Tell us about your background. I mean, you guys are ones that communicate. I know that you just recently had a show on Goop that is probably giving you tons of visibility.
Mhm.
Maybe share with everyone, sort of a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I am a somatic sexologist, and what that means is I basically work in the body, not just with the mind. I'm not like a therapist who you might go in and do talk therapy with. I'm looking at many, many facets of our sexuality from a very holistic point of view and from actually what's happening in the body. And it's been an interesting, because you could kind of liken it to being a doctor, right? Business wise, it's like, okay, I have a one-on-one practice and many years of having a one-on-one practice. And then how do you leverage that, right? Because then I become the person and that becomes the entire business. So if I get sick, then there's no money being made. So the part of the journey has been, how do I move from this being a one to one to a one to many type of business? And I think that's a lot where Ian came in that journey. And also, like, what are the frameworks? And I think the word framework has been really powerful for us in our business. What are the frameworks that we can create that help to make that shift, help to move a mission forward? And I've always been a mission driven business, and I think when Ian came in, that started shifting because I didn't care about making money. I just, the mission, the mission, the mission, the mission, kind of
and
type of personality.
and I'm greedy.
But but greed or the ambition is what can make the fuel the mission, right?
Yeah, so
It's the
I'm not forgetting, because we kind of have a framework around this, because there's mission driven business, and then what's the other one?
More like a lifestyle driven business.
Lifestyle driven business. And I don't think that the two of them are in opposition to each other, but being able to find the line between those two, because Jaya's mission was so strong, being able to find the line.
And it has to be sustainable. I mean, even if that's been my learning, and the thing that Ian has helped balanced out. He jokes that he's greedy, but really he's super humble. And the piece that I just didn't have was making it sustainable. Like, I just didn't care about making it sustainable or making it something that could grow into this bigger and bigger and bigger thing. Just wanted the mission. I just wanted the mission.
But there's a translation challenge as well that you didn't see how to surmount, which was, because the work you do and had done was somatic, of the body,
right?
Being with,
I couldn't see how to leverage.
Well,
what's the mission?
So my mission was to free the world of shame around their sexuality, but also this piece of, I saw a world when we free ourselves from shame around our sexuality. It's a world without rape culture. It's a world where the sexes no longer have a battle. It's a world
free
of
from
unconditional love, trauma. Essentially I could go like, oh, orgasms for world peace, or like,
That's a great
freeing ourselves sexually so that we are a more peaceful culture between, you could say men and women, but I've expanded that into all genders now, between all genders, that we really are living a world more free in our sexuality and more free in our sexual expression, so that we don't have the neuroses that we have around sexuality.
World erotic liberation.
Or, we've been playing with pleasurifying the world. How can we pleasurify the world so that we live in more pleasure? I mean, we all work so much and we don't rest enough and take care of ourselves. And to me, that's part of pleasurifying the world, is having a balance between work and play and pleasure and rest.
Is pleasure a option or is it a need?
Well,
we have a core brand value called pleasure first. So one of our brand values is pleasure first.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, pleasure is what fuels. It's life. It's life force. It fuels us. And so essentially we run out of steam eventually if we keep we keep operating without pleasure in our
And if you
lives.
take it to the spiritual, the creative energy, the energy that brought us all here, that is erotic energy, that is sexual energy, that is pleasure
We're all
energy.
a product of sex.
And hopefully that sex was pleasurable, but in many cases, for many people, it wasn't. So if we're all born out of pleasure, then I think we're more likely to live lives out of pleasure.
The world would be a better place if people had more orgasms, I'm sure.
I agree
Definitely.
100%.
100%.
So maybe
My
it's
O
a
vitamin.
need.
I need my O vitamin every day.
Totally. So you were describing, like, I guess it's similar to my journey, which is, you're the artist leader, communicating and educating about what you do, and trying to cross the chasm into creating sort of a movement, a groundswell, an audience and so forth. What's that journey been like? From what have you done? What steps have you taken, and what have you learned along the way?
Ooh. Do we
What
have
a
a
ride.
6-hour podcast?
So, hey, as long as we need. I've had a couple podcasts we did it in 2 parts, so
Okay.
I think people want the detail. People really want to know the journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you started talking about the first part of it, which was you're in a one-to-one business. And first, there's just a lot about how to make that profitable, sustainable. A business doesn't wipe you out emotionally and physically. And the first stage of getting you from sort of like the where's all the money? Like,
yeah, I couldn't understand because I had a lot of success. What it looks like success, right? It was full client base. I had written the books. I'd been on all the TV shows.
This is like 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I had done a lot that would make it look like, oh, she's successful. She's a best-selling author and but I was like, I just couldn't break the ceiling with the one-on-one because you can only do so much, and really started soul searching. Well, what does this thing look like? And the first thing that I did was stopped hourly charging. And I think that was a big turning point because everything was this hourly rate. To go from that to, okay, I'm going to work with you for 6 months and that's going to look like this because I value what I do, versus it being based on hourly time. It's based on the results that we're going to get with a client. And so then it went from that to programs and packages that I started to do in my one-on-one. And that changed everything. I kind of got through that six-figure ceiling that I was in. And that we started doing events, and then Ian started coming into the business more with a live event, which then we could leverage because we could get, as many people as we could get in a room into an event and still produce results for them
and offer them like Jaiya is saying, packages or group programs, or in another event, offer an event to an event.
But a lot of it was my inner game psychology. So much of it was my money stuff and how I was raised to think about money, like work hard, work
How many clients
ethic.
did you take in that first year of going to packages?
I took 75 clients that year into 6-month programs. And that was like, what am I doing? And my clients were even telling me like, you need to charge more. And that was, again, like I would charge just enough to pay for their program. So like sometimes I was even paying for people to go through my program. Like I was volunteering. I didn't have a job or a business. I had a volunteer.
You're the artist.
Yeah, definitely the artist. And I had, fortunately, I had my own business at the time in a completely different field. And that was sort of keeping us afloat during that time. And then the big transition came. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week and all that sort of thing. So in 2007, around the time that book came out, I read that and it completely shifted my psychology. Not so much around only working 4 hours a week, but finding something that was meaningful, that could be, leveraged, could be sold at scale. I didn't know what that thing was. And I didn't know that at that time I was falling in love with the woman who was going to put that very thing in my lap, which ultimately, took another 6 or 7 years to birth and come into focus. But was it Brendan Burchard who basically downloaded you with the whole idea of the framework thing?
Yeah, I started taking business courses. I was obsessed with sex courses. I took all the things in sexuality, but if I really wanted to make this mission work, I remember being at a Brendan Burchard workshop and him standing there with like, what's your why? What's your mission? And I felt like I was going to puke because it was so huge. It was one of those things where like part of what was holding me back was the mission felt so insurmountable by myself.
Mhm.
And he started talking about frameworks, and that was a really big piece too, is like, can I take what I know and what I've seen in my private practice over and over again and create some kind of framework? And so I started looking at, how do I create a framework? How do I leverage and bring this to a lot of people? How do I take this mission through a framework into the world? And congealing, and all the stuff I knew about sexuality and stuff I'd seen in my practice. And then and I was obsessed with personality typing things like disc profiles
Mhm.
and the Enneagram and, INFP and ENFJs and all the things.
I'm in the Tony Robbins bubble, so yeah, we get all those.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. So I loved all those things, and started thinking, well, what could I do with sexuality that's something like that? Do we have sexual personalities, or do we have a blueprint for our sexuality? And eventually it was 2011 where it really like started to congeal into something, and I had made frameworks before, but they weren't landing. And I could tell when things landed or didn't land,
They weren't
and
landing for you in
landing
terms
for
of,
me, landing for the
yeah,
clients.
actually working with the client and being like the clear as a bell, like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you had at least 3 or 4 frameworks that you were trying to position.
Mm-hmm.
We had done a video course or 2
Mm-hmm.
and, tried to leap phases in business. So I was in the support role during a lot of this time. I wasn't fully in the business. And, Jaiya, my amazing A+ type personality partner, especially at the time, would take the course. And a lot of the trainers out there, the people teaching these courses, they're teaching phase 2, phase 3 business,
like an automated business with an email capture,
scaled business and email capture, and a lot of things that you need the support structure. So Jaiya was shooting for that, but didn't have the ground.
I kept building funnels,
Yeah, it's the
like the
foundation.
Jeff Walker funnel and
Classic. Yeah, that's what my book is about. Is about, like, I think that a lot of people jump to automation too quick, and they don't know how to make connection.
Yeah.
They don't know how to deliver their message. They aren't even clear what that message is or what the value proposition is. They just assume that is what's going to make success. And the reality is, in my opinion, is the journey towards communicating, simplifying, and having personal connection with people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the connection thing, and a couple of mentors we worked with, Mark and Shannon
from Big Impact, they really helped me to see, oh, well, level 1 is this, you got to monetize and get money in the bank and make connection. Like you're talking about, build relationship
and learn the language of your client. So kind of like the marketing survey thing of what's their pain, what's their problem, and what is the solution.
So what does that look like for you guys? Was that level 1? Is that an offering that you made, or is that when you say framework, is that a back-end framework on your side, or is it a framework you presented to the clients?
My framework was the Erotic Blueprints that really
that's brilliant.
started landing.
So this gave birth to the Erotic Blueprint.
Yeah.
That really
it
struck me very quickly. So that's the lightning bolt for me on that whole framework. So this gave birth to the Erotic Blueprint. Can you describe to everybody what it is? Because I think this is quite profound, to be honest with you.
Sure. So what I started noticing in my practice, because I was obsessed with personality types and how can I put things into a framework, and started thinking about all of that and looking at my PhD, it was just this whole congealing of things. I had read a book called The Erotic Mind by Jack Morin. And in the book, Jack talks about your core erotic theme. What is your core erotic theme? And that started to spur me around this. What is the theme? What are the things I keep seeing show up over and over and over again in my private practice? And what I noticed was there were certain people turned on by different categories of things. And so the first one that I noticed was the energetic. And an energetic is someone who's turned on by tease, anticipation, space, yearning, longing. They like the thing that's out there that they can't quite touch. It's all the anticipation of that thing. And then there's a sensual, and the sensual is someone who's turned on by what we think of in the sensual senses. So taste, smell, seeing something beautiful, the erotic
they
dancing.
bring the artistry to sex. You know,
Mhm.
the flavors, the taste. They can have full body orgasms. They can eat a strawberry and just the moaning
Mhm.
and the orgasmic experience from eating food or hearing a beautiful piece of music.
Yeah, slow dancing. So
And-
whereas the energetic likes all this space, the sensual likes to collapse
and
it.
touch and deep penetrating touch.
Yeah. And then the next one's the sexual, and the sexual is someone who's turned on by what we think of as sex in our culture. So we think of penetration, we think of orgasm, we think of nudity, we think of penis inside vagina. Like these are the things that we think of as sex. And so that's what they're usually turned on by. And their superpower is that sex is something that feels very simple and easy turn on. They still have depth. It doesn't mean they lack depth. And those three were the first three that I started to really like see and hone in on. And then later came the shapeshifter, and the shapeshifter is someone who's turned on by all of it. They love all the things all at once, want more and more and more. And then the final one, which is so interesting because my partner is this final one, was the kinky. And the kinky is someone who's turned on by the taboo. And that's whatever is taboo for you. So that might mean that it's I'm turned on by
sex out of missionary position,
or you know, or it could be handcuffs, or it could be spanking, like intense sensation. And so it was so interesting to me that as I noticed these things, and in where Ian and I were in our own personal relationship, because had you started to come into the business around that time? I think it was a little later.
But I was tangentially.
But you know, we were really struggling. Like I was like the sex expert. I'd been in this field for many, many years, and we just had a new baby, and we were in that phase. Your business had crashed.
It was 2008, 2009, and I was in custom design. My business tanked. Like dropped 70%, what felt like overnight, like the day my child was born. So my stress hormones were through the roof. My libido crashed. My confidence was at subfloor zero. And you were coming to bed, you know.
And I'm primarily sexual blueprint, sexual energetic. So I come to bed and initiate sexual. I'm like, come on, like, let's do the thing.
Hand on the penis and let's go. Chop, chop.
I would literally say that sometimes. Chop, chop. Come on.
Let's go.
That's a really good way to turn your partner who's not sexual
not
on.
words you want associated with your penis. Chop, chop. So, and then I would initiate, because I'm primarily sensual and kinky, and I was like exhausted. I needed to relax to even think about or feel sexuality in my body at all. So I'd come to bed and I would cuddle and I'd want to get close.
And I'd roll my eyes like, oh God, he's cuddling with me again.
So we were...
So you were mismatching at that moment. And
exactly.
And here you are, the sexual expert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
and I knew all the techniques, you know, so that's another interesting thing in the business shift was going from like a technique teacher where I would give a lot of content and a lot of techniques, and here's how to do all the things, and here's how to turn on everybody on. I was missing this framework. I was missing this piece in the business, and this piece that tied into the mission, really, because it's about who am I? Who am I as an erotic being, and not being ashamed of that anymore. It's like, oh, he's kinky. Wonderful. I'm 0% kinky. I don't know anything about that. Let me go learn about that. Or I could be in shame, like, oh my God, my partner's kinky and I don't know what to do. And that's bad, or that's weird, or whatever. And I think the blueprints really help people uncover who I am, overcome the shame about that this is just the way somebody's wired. There's nothing bad, wrong. It's just, let's go learn about it. It's a skill set that we can all learn.
Mm-hmm. Like
it's music. Like a Rosetta Stone for me. I mean, it's like with my wife and I mean, I'm a energetic shapeshifter.
Awesome.
And so, but Jill thinks I'm asexual, but I think when I did your blueprint, you actually have I'll put the link, by the way, in the show notes. Yeah, if you have that available for people.
Yeah, the quiz.
Sure, the quiz.
The quiz. And I did that. It was super insightful. And then after seeing you live, so that's where I've seen you twice now live, and when you kind of were describing the blueprint, I don't believe I recall you talking about the blueprint 2 years ago. Am I right?
No, we talked about it. Yeah.
Okay. So, but I really resonated with it this last time. And so my wife and I, we've actually integrated that. Unbelievable. Like just even the process of blueprinting helped me understand her so much more, and vice versa. And it's like, this is an incredible gift, and this insight that you've given people with your framework. One of the questions I've been curious to ask you is, Are you familiar with archetypes?
Yes.
So brand archetypes, it's like you have the bad boy, you have the caregiver, you have, and I was thinking of the 12 archetypes, Carl Jung's archetypes and brand archetypes, a little bit like your blueprint in some way. It's just a different viewing model of this, and I'm just curious, like, have you thought about that blueprint being applicable to business?
Yeah, totally. We have we've trained over 300 coaches, and it's one of the things that we dip into them with their enrollment calls and their sales calls and stage presentation. Because if you're on a call with somebody, and we've had people who are marketers and salespeople get deeply into the blueprints and start to use these to change how their how they write their copy, how they're doing sales calls, how they're doing stage presentations, because it's very different if you got an energetic that you're trying to bring into the offer. You're going to be approaching them with a different vocal tone, with a different approach.
Whereas if like, I can't stand the sales thing. I just want to fast forward, get to the end, know the price so I can sign up and click the freaking button.
And that's the sexual.
So that would be interesting to take the language you have and marketing language and almost map in, well, what are the marketing behaviors that would be likely predisposing somebody that's a sexual versus energetic versus kinky. Like, I think even kinky in marketing, I use
you
kinky
can't
in
have
marketing
it.
all the time.
It's the takeaway.
I take it away. It's like that, what McDonald's did, right? Like, they took the double bacon, Big Mac away, and then they bring it back. You can't have it. And so it makes it popular coming back. So it has some relevance.
Totally.
Absolutely. We actually have done this. I think it was our last live event. We had about 1,000 people in the audience. This was before COVID hit. And I just flat out told them, this is going to be a teaching. It's a consensual offer. We always do everything consensual in our community. It's just part of our brand as well. And so we say, okay, this is a consensual offer. You can come back and hear it or not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it through the blueprints. I'm going to actually do the offer through the blueprint so that you can learn more about the blueprint and how to speak to each other in this as I'm doing the offer. So it's fun.
And if you think about,
I actually get a whip out for the kinky. Okay, back to the back of the room, everybody who wants this kinky, sign up, go.
You're like, ooh, perfect.
And if you think about seduction is a whole process of enrollment. And are you using the right tool, the right vocal quality, the right
body
body language?
And so what's really interesting about seduction, I think seduction, or sometimes when we say marketing, like, people can go into feeling like they're being manipulated. But I really see this, and I talk about this, is it's not that we're seducing you to manipulate. We are seducing because it honors who you are. We're speaking to who you are so that you can hear a message or hear the next steps. It's not a coercion, or seduction is not coercion. They are two very, very different things.
So let me give you an example of what's, usually has been a red flag X with marketing, is when they put a gratuitous like beer ad with sexuality sort of there. And a lot of people are opposed to that, going, well, you're just using sex to sell. How does this play in that?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I think it's fascinating how sexuality is used to sell.
Is it negative? Is it our perception that's like, is that so wrong? But then you think
what
about,
I think is the mix-up is that we have all this shame about sex, but then we can have a naked woman with a gun on a billboard. And what is the messaging that naked woman with the gun, like, there was this, when we lived in LA, there was this ad, and I don't even remember what it was for, but it was a machine gun with a naked woman on the side of all these buses. And I was like, okay, we're not allowed to have sex, but we got a woman with a machine gun naked on the side of a bus. Like, what is the messaging that is telling us about sexuality, about women, about violence? And then I worked for Playboy for a while, and one of the producers on Playboy and I were having this discussion about, well, what's this shame about sex and showing naked bodies and all of this in our culture? And she said, it's really interesting, because she used to work for the big networks. She said, I could show a naked woman dead, beaten
after a rape scene,
after, a big horrible thing had happened to her, but I couldn't show people making love and naked and in the same way, but we could do that. And I thought, well, wow, that's really, really interesting. And again, like, these are just fascinating things. I don't like to get into the right wrong so much as I like to get into what is happening to your brain in those moments, or what is the message that we're giving children around about sexuality? What would be a better way? What do you want to indoctrinate yourself with? And to just super get conscious, and let's just ask questions about, well, why is that in our culture that we can see a naked body that's had horrible things done to it, but we can't see a naked body in pleasure? Like, so what is that? And I think that that's where the conversation with this advertising and sexuality gets interesting, is when we ask really compelling questions about that.
It's super interesting question. Like I was thinking so much about this podcast, and just wondering, how do I approach this subject without being hypocritical, without going with judgment, and really just approaching this with, how can sex appropriately be used, but not sex? Because I think when we use that word, it means so many things to different people and have different reactions to it. We're sexual beings. What you're describing is the true self of what, how you respond to pleasure. Can we use that in marketing in an ethical, appropriate way, which, like you said, is honoring the person, and we're not trying to manipulate, but what we're trying to do is create an experience. Because I did a podcast with Joe Pine, who wrote the book called Experience Economy, and it's about transformations and experiences being the next level of brand and marketing. And there's a big desire now for people to have an experience, to feel, touch. I think I mentioned before the show, I worked with, I'm actually in a mastermind with her, and I did a podcast, the author of Aesthetic Intelligence, and the use of senses in marketing in luxury brands. I think this blueprint and what you're bringing to the table is a possible new opening for this type of marketing. If could you describe a little bit about what you think the future could look like a hopeful future, even? Because you're in Goop, and I think this is your presentation and that whole series that Goop's bringing, I think, is bringing a lot of acceptance around, hey, let's just kind of like have a more open mind about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Netflix show, we crossed a threshold, our whole business is changing right now because of the Sex, Love, and Goop show on Netflix, and what's happened. And I think it has opened up a conversation, but it also made it safe all of a sudden for the mainstream to go, well, wait a minute, let's talk about this. We've heard from therapists. We've heard our coaches are getting more and more business, and therapists are getting more and more business with people who are going, I saw this show and now I really want to make a change in our sex lives. So it's opened up a box. Mm-hmm. Or a portal. Somebody wrote to me and they're like, Jaiya, you opened a portal finally in this industry, because it's hard for us. We get banned on Facebook. We get banned from sending emails because we are sexuality, and we're pretty PG, I think.
Yeah, we're very PG.
We got banned for using the word pleasure, and I've fought this for 30 years, and hopefully I'm hoping that this is a threshold moment where we can have these conversations as adults. Like, let's have an adult conversation about sexuality. Like, let's get conscious about this. Yeah.
We're still pushing against a lot of edges, and it's a challenge because, so I won't name names, but we got kicked off of our email service provider the day that the Goop show went live.
Oh no!
And it was because
our entire business crashed.
We had to rebuild.
Who had a similar issue? Tulsi Gabbard, who was running for a presidential campaign, and she had something similar happen when she just was getting traction on stage. I actually was helping her with her campaign. So wow. This censorship is an issue.
It's a real thing. And, something that people might find very interesting about our business is we've probably spent $200 or $300 in traditional advertising the entire time we've had our business. And largely because what's that? Yeah, because largely there's nowhere we can advertise.
No way,
I mean, we could advertise in certain places if we had a bunch of money, right? So we could buy billboards, we could do certain things that bypass. But without the money, it's all very guerrilla marketing, and it's been built on word of mouth. So it's largely podcasts like this, and people who have had an experience either with the Blueprint quiz or the blueprints themselves, or one of our coaches come to our events.
So it is that experiential piece. I mean, that is really how I've built the business, and with Ian coming in, we started doing more experiential. He was the DJ at our events, and then people kept going, "More Ian, we want Ian." And then before he knew it, he was on stage at the events. And so, where is marketing going? I think that's the question here that we're coming back to.
Because so maybe insert an idea. So think of the parallel changes going in that are. I'm not comparing. I'm just saying it's a similar change. If you look at the use of magic mushrooms and legalization of weed, and you look at things that are very taboo, but now are becoming mainstream. I noticed that
Mm-hmm.
there's, you know, there's I think a stock that's about to go on the Canadian exchange that they're doing research around medical use of magic mushrooms. That would have been unheard of
Mm-hmm.
10
Even
years
10
ago,
years
5
ago.
years ago.
Yeah.
So there's a shift happening, I think, in consciousness and openness. My good friend of mine just did a podcast on where he had an experience doing plant medicine, and he's interviewing CEOs that are using plant medicine.
Yeah.
That, if I even brought that up in the boardroom table in marketing like 10 years ago, I would have been shunned. But
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
now
I
it's
think
part
I
of a
just read an
conversation.
article. I think it was Forbes. Don't quote me on it, but I think it was Forbes. They said that it's slated to be a $100 billion business, something like this,
Hmm.
by 2030. The psychedelics movement. I took the MAPS training, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, and we've been doing fundraising for them. And so I think there is some kind of correlation as well. If we look at what happened with the sexual revolution, there was also a psychedelics wave, another wave of psychedelic evolution or revolution. I was just working with a producer on a show, and she was saying, "Are we in our next sexual evolution?" And I really liked that like word of there's something evolving here. We're not revolting. We're not in another revolution, but we are in an evolution. And
Evolution.
I think we're also seeing it coincide with the psychedelic movement because the sexual wellness industry is also slated for a big boom,
$3 to $4 billion.
just as much in the next few years. That sexual wellness, especially for women. Um, and it's just fascinating to me that we were in this loop back 50s, 60s, 70s, and now we're seeing this same resurgence.
The hope is that we've learned something from the revolutionary language and the immature language that took place in the 60s and 70s, and now, like the Sex, Love, and Goop show and maps, and people are bringing these topics forward in a way that aren't salacious, that aren't necessarily counterculture. They're more about, this is us, this is how we heal, this is how we come together and honor who we are as people, as a culture. And the psychedelics are a whole window into,
Well, there's
obviously,
so much science behind it.
Yeah.
exactly.
and
Yeah.
and so I think about the science behind the health of your relationship and its impacts on the world, your health of your sexuality in physical and personal health and mental health. I think they might see like mindfulness. Like I work with a group, it's an insurance company, and I've got them to do Tony Robbins priming and meditation before we do a group meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's unheard of. And so part of the future, I think, maybe is here, is that I believe you are at the forefront of what could be this sexual evolution, where it is integrated into HR for businesses. And that's the piece that I think is connecting here, that I saw with getting you guys on here, was some of these movements happen, groundswells happen when it's a personal movement, but when you get business involved and has actual impacts on business, things change. Money's
Yeah.
behind it. That's where I think is where I believe, my opinion, I believe you're on the forefront of. Imagine if you were to do what your blueprint in an organizational company, and they were to apply it to themselves and their relationships, and see this isn't from a different dimension. I believe that it's gonna have the same effect that some of these other things are having.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm
Well,
thinking too big and too far, but that's my
cool.
thought.
Love it. So one of the things that at that same Tony, not Brandon Burchard conference, I was in a breakout group with a guy who was super high end corporate CEO exec coach, and he said to me flat out, he's like, 3 or 4 sessions in, I'm working with every single one of these guys, and eventually they say, I'm rocking it in business, this is great, and my home life is a disaster. I don't know how to communicate my life.
We're not having sex.
We're not having sex. I don't know how to, break the chill. And he was like, all of my clients could use the work that y'all are doing.
And this is why my private practice today is I mostly work with entrepreneurs who are high, hundreds of millions, billionaire clients, because I see the effect on their entire businesses. And some of them have brought me in to do like sexuality training and just kind of help them through, because sex comes up in the workplace. There's attractions, there's relationship stuff, there's
boundary breaks,
there's
lawsuits,
there's loss. I mean, that it's a thing.
Well,
And
your
so
ROI, if you don't have a relationship, you could lose 50% of what you own. There's a good ROI to put in investment.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Right.
Exactly. And so just helping people navigate the boundaries conversation, the consent conversation, touch in the workplace, especially when we look at different blueprints. We don't want, if somebody's an energetic, they don't want people touching them. They want space. They want people, so how do we have those consent conversations? What are the policies within the organization? How do we clean up if there have been boundary breaks or things that have felt unsafe? And how do we create an environment of safety and expression for everyone? Because I want everybody to be free to freely express, but we also need to honor and consent where everybody's at and the different personalities that we all are.
Yeah, and I think when you say that, some people in their mind, they jump to, oh, there's going to be sex everywhere in the office or something. Where what I was going with that in terms of a blueprint is even I look at, and this was going to be honoring you, is I look at what's been the biggest factor that has grown my business. You've indirectly been part of it. When I did the Tony Robbins relationship event and my relationship, we invested in our relationship. Nothing has made my business grow more than my relationship. That it's because of that directly. I'm a marketer. I've done all the business, possible events, Tony Robbins business events. All those have made a big difference, but nothing has made a bigger difference than we went to that relationship event, and now again twice. And your blueprint's been a big part of that. I realized that there's a connection there, and I think that's the light bulb that I think a lot of business leaders that you're working with, and I think that the message, hopefully in this podcast, is there's a connection there. It's not you have a sex life or or even like a church and state, like, people going to church on Sundays. Now you're seeing spirituality being integrated, and I think sexuality integrated into everyday life is where I think this evolution is. That's my perception.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we silo too much. And I think the other thing that comes out of the sexual journey, I'm going to go a little broad here, but one of the things that comes out of the sexual journey is you understanding who you are. And when you understand who you are and you feel solid in who you are, everything changes when you know that. When you know this, me, and you don't have any shame about that, you can go out and kick ass in business because you know that, who you are. And I think a lot of us walk around with all the conditioning and programming and crap piled on top of us, and then a lot of this process is unraveling all of that. Once I had that piece, I had love for myself. It doesn't matter how much I charge, it doesn't matter, because it no longer was a thing. I wasn't ashamed of money. My money journey is a lot like people's sexual journeys. I mean, we all have our thing, and I don't know what your particular thing, those of you who are listening, is. But when you find that thing and you can break free and break through with it and come to that deep sense of self, there's nothing like that.
Hallelujah.
How do you think the COVID and us being on these screens and not, connecting as much, how has that impacted your mission or this evolution or just in general? Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Because this doesn't feel like it's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, we've actually loved COVID because it was a gift for us, not because people are suffering, but for our business, it was really wonderful. Because we were on the road all the time and doing these big events and one-on-ones. And luckily we were in a position in our business where we were already we had online events, an online platform, an online course with the Erotic Blueprint Breakthrough course. And so we were like, oh, we don't have to travel. Oh, we get to do this, and it transfers via screen, and our clients loved it. But go ahead. I really have retired from the business aspect and the one-to-many. Ian's been much more in it these last few years.
It was a major pivot. I mean, so many businesses obviously went through the pivot, so I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, but
can I say one thing?
No.
I think that it's so kinky of you. Yes, sir. I think that one thing that has shifted and where marketing is going, just to come back to that for a moment as we're discussing this, is people smell BS so much more during this time of COVID. Like if you're inauthentic, if you've been running your business, coercing or kind of shabby or not having great customer care, I think that those businesses who are in integrity and who give their clients an experience of results, and
you've also got Me Too and Black Lives Matter and a lot of the
there's
cultural
a lot of movements
of just sussing out. Like,
and we had our gender training, we had in place, we were in the midst of doing more diversity trainings for all of our coaches. So we had a lot of this stuff in place, so we weren't as impacted by those things. You want to say more?
Well, the pivot, there's a couple things, obviously, like COVID really showed the fractures in people's relationships because you could no longer run off to work and avoid your relationship.
You're at home.
You're at home. You're stuck. And I think a lot of people came to some heavy soul searching. There's been a lot of divorce. There's been a lot of separation. The people who are solo are looking, how do they connect? How do you connect in this COVID world? So, right out of the gate, right when the whole thing was started, we did a 30 days of tools and tips and tricks and things to keep
help. Like my first question was, how can I help during this time? And so we just offered a big free, like, here everybody thing in the community.
I think everybody did. A lot of people did.
Yeah.
Bringing people, our experts in, using our coaches, using our community. And then just kept seeing, how do we translate this to an online format? Like Tony Robbins has got his huge media room down in Florida that he built out. We did something similar for our Path to Passion event, so we could pull it off and still have intimacy and breakout rooms with 20 people.
Zoom was like, we've never seen anybody do this. We had like 100 breakout rooms or something crazy, We just relied on the technology.
So you're on Mighty Networks. You're on a community as well.
Yeah.
I just interviewed Gena, the CEO of Mighty Networks. I was my last episode before Dave Navarro, and I'm on that community as well. How's that virtual community been for you in terms of your growth, and what do you see the future of virtual communities with this?
So I see that as the ultimate pillar for our business. We had our group on Facebook because of Facebook regulations. I wanted to move off. I think I was a little premature in terms of people being used to finding these social networks.
Like 3 years ago or something, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So definitely felt like an immediate atrophying of our community moving from Facebook into Mighty. It's a big part of my initiative over the next year, and some of the things Mighty's been doing that I've been hopeful that they would do.
Like the live.
Yeah, the live
just cast. That's cool. Yeah.
I was like, yay! The day I started with them, I started emailing them and like, when are you going to make a video and all this kind of stuff. So I'm excited about what they're doing. I'm excited that they're really looking at how do you create successful, connected community without advertising, without all of the things that pull people away from the focus of why they came in the first place. I think so. It's a big focus for me over the next year because that's where ultimately the growth of our business resides for me, because like we said, we have challenges with normal channels of communication, email providers, Facebook, any place where people would normally build their communities. They're kind of persona non grata for us. And inside of a community, we have the opportunity to start to really get to know in depth
and build relationship. And they build relationship with each other.
Exactly.
Which I think is even more important than us as leaders necessarily. It's that they form relationships. People find each other. They fall in love. They form friendships. They get together. And I think that those things have been really powerful in building our community.
And, it's the idea of being able to start to provide very specific services, courses, things that dial in with our client base's needs, because the clients have come to us and come together in a concentrated place where we can have that conversation. So I have a concern, which about community and done on the virtual realm, and Facebook is sort of like one of the scary poster children for it in terms of this siloing of information and people being targeted to only get the information that they're seeking and reinforcing limited siloed views about how the world works. So I think that's something to also work against and counter inside, and being responsible about holding a community is to make sure that the community is diverse, does have diverse views, isn't necessarily like ours is not a political community. However, being sexual, being erotic could be viewed as a political act. But the
people have called me an activist, but I've never thought I was an activist. But I guess I am, just because I'm a radical in sexuality. But I've never thought about that before. I never have thought of myself as radical. I mean, I talk about sex like it's a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Well, I think people have different charges to different words, right? Like an activist to one person is somebody who is brave enough to lead a charge in a movement. Another person, that means something negative, that they're for something that's against the grain, and that's not for me. So I think that the language that people are using is so interesting, how people get so much charge behind it, and they label things, like Tony Robbins and Sage talked about it, that relationship about these stickies that people put over each other, that I think is going to change. I'm an optimist. I believe that this is what you're doing, and you're breaking down barriers and you're opening up conversations, is opening people up to being open to just, hey, maybe that activism around this is needed right now. I mean, if whatever you want to call it, but I do think that you are leading an evolution. I mean, I think you two are directly responsible for, in a good way, for leading this erotic blueprints is brilliant, and leading the way where people can know themselves and view sexuality as an important, it's not just something that you just sort of, it's an afterthought. Before, I was kind of like, okay, well, we have sex and we kind of just like, let's have sex. But now I'm like, we're thinking about, oh, she's different. All right, and I ask her, like, because we're both shapeshifters, I'm going, we have like a little whiteboard, and I'm like going, are you energetic today? Or like, so we have fun with it. And so what is that really about? It's about human connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's maybe missing with people. And I think that's what the message, I think, to me anyways, is that you're really helping enable deep human connection, however you want to view it. Even just understanding how someone's sexuality preferences isn't the labeling of him, her, and stuff the beginning of that. Maybe you're going to have a future where I will publicly say I'm a shapeshifter. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's possible.
People are starting to put it on their dating profiles and starting to identify themselves in that way. I think that one of the most potent things is that we're giving people a language to articulate who they are in this moment, like you're saying. What is my erotic truth? And it hasn't really had a language up until this point. It's been 10,000 years of a very limited language. Even when you start to look at something as simple as, what does orgasm mean?
Or what does sex mean? You talked about that earlier. Like, we all define it so differently. I mean, what does that mean for you? And I think most people have that limited definition, especially if you are a sexual blueprint and identify that way, of what this thing is that is sex. And let me tell you, one of my things has been, what is erotically possible? And I love the word innovation.
Yeah.
Esther Perel talks about, she's author of Mating Captivity. She talks a lot about couples who innovate last. And this idea of we have to innovate a business, otherwise it dies. We need to do the same thing in our relationships. And so this thing of what's possible, and how do we keep innovating, and how do we keep playing, and how do we keep discovering, and not assuming, well, Ian's a kinky right now, but that doesn't mean that he can't be a shapeshifter in 6 months, because he completely expands his eroticism and his erotic blueprint and discovers more of himself as he peels away the conditioning and programming. So this what is erotically possible, and most people have only tasted 3 flavors on the erotic palette of what is available for us to taste.
And I'll actually give that as a word of warning around the blueprint quiz, because it is a beautiful early instant access to oh yes, now I have something. Now I'm seen energetic. I never knew that was a thing, and that's why I twitch while I'm connecting erotically with my lover, or that's why a breeze can blow across my skin and I have orgasm. But it's not a label to box yourself in. It's a label as a starting point, so that then you realize actually where you're limited. Like, oh, this is one way to get pleasure. My partner, like you're experiencing, she might be energetic one day, you might be kinky or sensual another day. And if I take that label and I go, well, I'm a kinky and that's my only thing, and that's how you have
Now
to.
you've become another fixed identity. And what I'd love to see people do around identity is to have choice. Okay, like shapeshifters have a lot of choice. I get to put on the kinky hat. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to put on an energetic hat. Oh, today I want all the flavors. Like that is being more choice and fluidity around the identity. One of our mentors, Sachin, he says an identity is just a viewpoint with a goal. So what is the goal of that viewpoint that you have in that current moment? And once you achieve that goal, then you're free to be in a different identity. And I love this conversation around identity, because it's like, well, who is really in there? Who are we underneath that? And I think both sex and psychedelics, you brought up these two things, lead us to who we are. They're pathways that lead us to more deeply feeling the truth of that.
And I view you, as both of you, as explorers. I mean, you were telling the story about finding the I guess you could say the sexual interest or something in something terrible, like I think you're talking about getting sick and actually having an orgasm.
Oh yeah,
Right?
throwing up, right?
and it's like, so maybe tell that story, but it's like, to me, that's you on behalf of mankind, if you will, pushing the boundary to really see what, like, the world differently. And that example was like, I was like, huh, isn't that a little bit like finding the gift in things that come
Everything.
your way that Tony Robbins talks about? Like, you
Mhm.
guys, the gift that you guys had, this is my opinion, is the gift that you had of being pressured not to be able to use traditional marketing, I think is setting you up for massive success in the future. All these systems, Facebook included, are failing. They're the groups, people don't understand that they're owned by these platforms and they have no control. The algorithms controlling their business. And if that went away, they would go out of business. And the Facebook group, I'm really happy that you've decided to go to that group. That's what I'm trying to get people to look at sustainability, because they need to be treated like an ecosystem. So I'm being an explorer of sorts, like you guys are, but on marketing, sustainable growth marketing. What can help somebody, an entrepreneur, sustain and beat the system, take advantage of the system, but not be beholden to the system? So I want to loop back to that example of your exploration of finding the gift in something terrible and finding something orgasmic about it. Like, I think this is a really interesting story.
Yeah, this question of like, can I make everything orgasmic? Everything in my life becomes an orgasmic experience, becomes a pleasurable experience. And one thing I absolutely hate is throwing up. Absolutely hate it. And I wasn't feeling well one day, and I was sitting there, and I just thought, like, oh gosh, you know how you get that feeling, like you get the kind of sweats and the mouth starts watering. You're like, oh no, it's coming. And I had the thought right before, like, can I make this orgasmic? Can I reinterpret it somehow in my brain from something that's bad and that I hate, and turn it into something that feels pleasurable because it's a release. It's just energy. And can I look at the pure essence of this experience, not as the label I put on it, not as me throwing up, just can I feel the pure energy of it? And then I just allowed it to all come, and it's orgasm. And now I'm just orgasming out of here, out of my mouth. and I just started laughing. And somebody was in the other room. They're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm just cracking up laughing, because it was just an interpretation, and that I could take anything. It was that moment where it's like, I think I have made it to everything is orgasmic, because I have arrived. Because I took the thing I hated the most and did that.
So that's what I believe this discussion is, that you guys are on the forefront of helping us, the most of us that haven't explored to the level you have, that broadens the experience of sex. Doesn't have to be to this one intimate act that we all call and think of as sex. It's like, maybe life is orgasmic and we just don't even know it. And that, I think, is maybe the gift. And I think that's maybe the journey that we're evolving towards, is really understanding ourselves different way as human beings, in how we interact, what's deep, what's important to us, and how we connect, and how we orgasm.
Amen.
And why can't business be? So that's, to me, goes back to my, business is beautiful, I believe, transforming. Someone might argue going, well, is that ethical to somehow create a business that does that. But I mean, if you have like some sort of connection to, like, if you want someone to smile, that's a good thing. Is an orgasm that much of a leap to go further? Right? As long
Right.
as it's consensual, and as
I
long
mean,
as,
we have a core brand value of pleasure first, and that's part of our meetings. I mean, it's not like we're all sitting around having orgasms together, but if it happened,
And it just
but
depends
it
what
is
somebody,
consensual,
it's
right? It's like,
consensual.
if you're going to come work for us, here is pleasure first as part of our organization. That means before we start a meeting, we're going to take a moment to breathe, or we're going to celebrate something. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're sitting around having sex. It just means, or, depending on your definition of sex, because for some people, drinking amazing tea could be orgasmic and a total sexual experience.
people describe
right?
that eating chocolate.
Yeah,
Exactly.
completely. Yeah.
And so come to the meeting with something that brings pleasure first. If it's your tea, if it's your chocolate, if it's wine, if it's like, what, I don't know if we do business
No, we
meetings
don't.
with wine,
We don't.
but I haven't been in a business meeting for a while, you can tell. But what's that thing that has us have pleasure first? Maybe it's breath, or like you said, priming. I mean, right there is a way to get into a different state before you start the meeting.
And what was the thing you read the other day about takes 1,000 times to make a habit?
I think it was 100 times to make
create a new synapse,
new neural pathway.
But if you're playing a game, it takes 10 times playing the game to create that neural pathway. So gameplay, making things fun and pleasurable. This is one of the things too around sex and sexuality, and what we do in our course and how we do our live workshops is we give people containers, like ways to play the game where you don't have the criticism, the judgment, the shame, the need to get it right. So you take all the importance out of what sex might have meant, or all of those judgments, and you get a new freedom of access, so that you get to build a vocabulary, you get to build your playground, and build it from a place of play. Like, oh, now I get to discover who I am and who my lover is, without having to be performative, right? That I'm doing this to get something done. I'm actually here just to glean and learn information, so that I become a better lover.
And I become much better at work when I'm doing it from my hot tub.
Totally.
Or I've had an orgasm before I get in the meeting,
I have, you can see, well, you can't see now because it's a little bit dark, but I have a hammock, and nothing makes me happier when I don't have to have a Zoom call and I'm on a phone call, because I just jump to my hammock. I mean,
Nice.
Yeah.
because I let it sway, and I'm really deep, and I'm deeply listening to the person, and I enjoy it. Like, that's having pleasure while I'm working, technically.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think that's the language that we can open the barrier with this kind of conversation you guys are creating. So I would love it anytime if you wanted to collaborate on like a brand sexual blueprint crossover collab or something. That I think would be fascinating. I have one last question I want to ask you guys, and kind of like open this some discussion around, is many people are going to watch that Goop episode, and they're going to be like me when I saw the two of you on stage. You were lying on a massage table, and your Ian was not even touching you, and you were having an orgasm, and I was losing my mind. I'm going, how is this possible? So I want to end this discussion on this last sort of like realm of, like, we were talking, you're pushing the boundary to the future, but most people don't even have, like, I think this is just making their heads trip, and it still makes mine, to be honest with you. So first, if you could describe it, and then I want to have just a quick little discussion around the fact that we don't even physically need to touch for that to happen, but you need to be in proximity, and there's this whole unseen, I call it, this unseen energy of possibility that is maybe just starting to crack open for people. Do you want to describe that first, the experience that people see on Goop, and I experienced at Tony Robbins?
Sure. So in Goop, it's the episode 2, and I don't want to give away too much, but also if you come to any of the live events or you see us speak live, if Ian's there, I often bring him on stage to just show this.
Do the demo, do the circus act.
We kind of joke that it's
the
like
parlor trick.
Become
The
our,
parlor trick,
our
yes.
trick. And yet it's not, it's so like real. And that's one of the things I love in the Goop show, that the person who I'm working with says, he says, but it's real, he's like,
because he had
the experience, right?
That was really powerful.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite moments. And so essentially what's happening is Ian is holding his hands over my body. I have a blindfold on. I always put a blindfold on because I want to really feel. I don't want to see what he's doing. I want to be able to really feel him. And so when I put the blindfold on, then I just start to just drop in to allowing my perception to expand. So my perception expands further than my physical body. And I can feel, I mean, if we look at energy and they can measure energy fields, or the devices that can measure electromagnetics of the body. And so we all have an electromagnetic field. Those fields can be different and they're measurable to be different in people's bodies. And so Ian, then, if you want to take over what you do.
So, we call it energetic orgasms, basically I'm just feeling for pockets of energy, whether it's,
and it might be a temperature change for people who don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's like you feel like you've literally gone into a pocket where the air has shifted.
Mm-hmm. It can become more dense. It can become more electric. There can be a number of things. And also presence, which we coach is like one of the primary, if not the primary thing to bring to your erotic connection, is bring your full presence. So my awareness is like completely lit up, and I'm simply looking for what I call the yeses. Like, where am I connecting to something? And is that a yes? Do I feel it? Can I drop in deeper to it? And am I finding responses in Jaiya's body, so that then, by being aware.
And my body is very demonstrative. Not everyone is super demonstrative like that, but my body will arch, or I'll have moans, or there'll be shakes and quakes that'll come out of my body. And I give Ian a lot of feedback too. Like, oh, right there. What I love in this show, because I've never actually been able to watch myself do it. So that was the first time I'm seeing myself doing that, because normally it's on stage. So we have never filmed that before. And so watching myself go back, it was like I knew exactly where his hands were every time. I get a little proud of myself because
it was amazing because you moved, you didn't know where his hands were, and I'm like, there's a direct connection. I was like, what is this? It's crazy.
Yeah, that moment where I say, he's above, are you above my head? And he was above my head. And so it was so cool to see that.
And what's interesting, people will ask like, well, how do you access that? How do you do that? And one thing is the yes, like, because I had total skepticism.
He was like, what is this weird stuff?
This is just total BS. Like, this is weird woo woo. I don't know what you're talking about. I would see her demonstrate with other sex educators and stuff. And eventually it was just like, okay, I got to drop in, figure out what's going on here, if it's true. And that's where I came up with the game of yes. I don't have to know what it is. I just have to know.
Or even feel it.
Just be like, okay, yes, there's something there. And now I'm going to say yes to that thing. And then I'm going to let that build or subside or do whatever it's going to do until I get to my next yes. And where's headed with this? Oh, the thing that really got me totally into the energetic was, because I'm very high kinky blueprint, was it finally was a way that I could drive Jaiya crazy. Like, I could tease her. I could not give her what she wanted. I could just have all that anticipation.
You could pull the energy away.
I could pull it away. So it became a game, and very fun for me to like see how far away I could get and feel it. Or even if I wasn't feeling it, is she feeling something? Because I can see what's happening in her body. So it's a lot of presence and awareness.
And I want to tell people, if you're not experiencing this, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. This is cultivated. I mean, I have spent 30 years, probably more than that. I have spent many decades exploring this. What is possible? What can I do with this instrument called my body? What else is possible? And I think we do this in our business as well. Like, what else is possible? Okay, we hit this hurdle, we hit this thing. Now let's see what else is possible. And I feel like a phoenix a lot of times. Like, okay, burn to the ground. What else is possible? Like, let's
you
see
broke
what
the 6-minute mile in orgasms, really. And so if you think of that, you're in proximity. I did a podcast with Master Co. He's are you familiar with Master Co? And
yes,
he's an energy healer. He was my client. I actually helped brand him. So I went through the process of learning to become a pranic healer, and I'm a knuckle dragging chainsaw, kind of guy. I've not really been familiar with energy, and I was blown away. I was really like fascinated with what I experienced. And one of the things that he's able to do was energetic healing from afar. I was on a Zoom with him, and I was going, really? Like, you can really do this? Like, I couldn't. And he says, put out your hand. And I put out my hand, and through the screen, he was taking his fingers and he's doing this. And I could feel something running their hands on my hand. And I was like losing my mind, right? So this would have been the beginning of. So my question for you is that you were doing this in proximity. What is is it, are you able to do this far away?
Jaiya
Absolutely.
has another lover who is having dream state orgasms with quite often.
Oh yes, but I want to share about a client of mine. Yeah, dream orgasms, other places.
Yeah.
It's just, it gets kind of, there's a lot of phenomenon, and I want to
Mhm.
also say that like these phenomenon are not it.
Mhm.
The phenomenon is cool, like phenomenon is fun, and I've been playing with that for many decades, as I mentioned. But again, it's like it's that core of essentially who you are. But I want to talk about a client of mine with
Mhm.
this. So he lives in another country, all the way across in Europe, and he is paralyzed, and not paralyzed fully, but has cerebral palsy, and he cannot speak. He wears a helmet that he types with like a little finger that can go into the keyboard. And we have scarves and colored scarves to communicate and all of this. And so in working with him, absolutely the energy, he could feel the energy, and he could move into spaces in his body just from us moving and playing with energy. And then I also had a teacher who was paralyzed, who we would play with. Can we just use erotic energy to play with creating orgasm distance wise? And so we'd be like, okay, tonight, like, let's send each other energy at this time and then see what happened. Or then not tell each other that we were sending each other energy and then
Mhm.
see what would happen. And absolutely, this can travel, because energy is energy. It doesn't zoom, distance, that doesn't matter to energy.
You're like the Magellan of sexual energy. It's amazing. So, I think of a car, right? Like you're talking about like sexual orgasms not touching. That's like a Ferrari over here, and a smile, and just having someone feel some level of pleasure in business and in life is maybe over here. And I think that what you're doing is you're really bringing to light. Sure, we're talking about sex, and you're not going to start a business. Well, maybe you will, but somebody is listening to this isn't going to go, well, I'm not going to really apply that to business. But I think there is a lot of application, is knowing that the Ferrari can go that fast. What can you do just very lightly, and that just is really about making people feel connected, because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a deep connection.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is what I think is what this podcast episode's been about, is just kind of like exploring that possibility. Do you have anything in closing to kind of, maybe connect the dots in terms of business and what you've learned, and how simply somebody could apply it to just everyday life, from just personal relationships of making someone feel connected to, maybe more?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's a deep question.
yeah, there's a lot to tie together.
Yeah.
I think the fundamental piece is coming back to who you are and your authentic being and presence. Presence in the moment allows you to be present to pleasure. It allows you to be present to connection. It allows you to be present what's true in the moment. And from the truth of the moment, all infinite possibility is available. And this is true in your sexual and erotic relationships. This is true in your business relationships. How much of yourself outside of, free from construct, free from judgment, free from shame, blame, predisposed concepts of who I am and who I'm speaking to, how free are you from those to really come to the present moment and create from here and now with total freedom? I think that ties together business success, relational success, global success. The more we can drop into that presence, the more we can access our pleasure, the more vibrant and alive we can live our lives.
Wow, that was so well said. You gave me a light bulb there, which is presence. If you think of a business, do you ever notice if you get somebody that's, basically just sent automatic emails, like, and you can tell they're automated. There's no
Mm-hmm.
presence there. There's no energy to it. It's like you're kind of like have a different feeling. But you can tell when someone actually wrote it, even if it was like sent out en masse, it just, there's, I don't know, there's something you can just feel about it. And I think that that's presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Interesting. If I took away, I can't believe I got that at the very end, but I think that is something that's really powerful is what you're talking about. And to be able to get to this level, and maybe for business, that's the connection, whether you're doing it through Zoom, we're doing it on, a marketing campaign is putting some presence and energy to it. I think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you
One of
guys
the
both so much. Do you have anything you want to share before we close?
Yeah, just one more thing. I think that's really important in business is to lead people back to themselves. I think we get afraid like we have to create a reliance on us as leaders or in leadership or as an entrepreneur or on our product. And there's something really strong to be said about leading people back to themselves, not to you as the
Guru,
answer
the
and
answer.
solution. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's a shift in marketing because a lot of times it's you're the answer, your product is the answer. And that piece of come back to you and learn to love you. Our front door says sex in big red letters, but behind that is really you loving you. And that's, I think, something that's made us successful is that we're always leading people back to themselves.
They came for the chocolate shake and they left for the transformation, which is the green shake of really getting to know themselves.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
That's,
Mhm.
I believe that is like if you think of the economy that we're heading toward, is I believe the transformation economy. Right now they say we're in the creator economy, but I think the transformation economy is what's the bigger cycle of what most businesses are going. And what you're describing is if you're transforming somebody, then they shouldn't need you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
completely.
Exactly. But yet they stay because you're leading them back to themselves.
And you want more.
Right.
I'm in my
Right.
second year of Tony Robbins Plat. Technically, you think I've been transformed, but I'm like, no, I want more. What level?
More.
I think that someone said the saying. I like it. You never stand in the same river twice,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mhm.
kind of how I'm viewing like going back and learning from somebody that I learned had transformation from, and maybe that's what they're experiencing with you when they come back and continue to work with you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well,
Beautiful.
where can people follow you, find you, and when they're listening to this and they want to tap into maybe the blueprint, even?
Yeah, so the most fun way to jump in is to jump right to the quiz and the assessment, which is the blueprintbreakthrough.com or eroticbreakthrough.com. Either one of those will take you there. So the blueprint breakthrough or erotic breakthrough.com. And then the main website is jaiyalove.com, JAIYALOVE.com,
Get some
jaiyalove.com.
Jaiya love.
Get some Jaiya love. And so those would be the main places. We're a little bit active on social media, but like we said, we're trying to guide people back to themselves, and social media is not the best thing at doing that sometimes. So come check out the quiz, find out your type, and come play the game. Play the game of life with us.
Beautiful. Thank you both for being on this show. And everyone that's listening, that's another episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast, now actually the Groundswell Origins Podcast. And if you want to leave me a note, just go to groundswell.fm. There's a microphone, just hit play. Tell me what you like to hear, what you liked, what you didn't like. And until next time, mahalo.